Continuing on with Chapter 5, starting on page 111, we have gross primary productivity, which is the energy made by autotrophs in an ecosystem. And not all of this is available to the consumers. Remember, only about 10% is available to consumers. The rest is lost to the ecosystem as heat. So autotrophs, again, are synonymous for producers. And all this energy is made by photosynthesis, but only 10% is actually turned into plant tissues, the plant bodies themselves, which we call biomass. All the bodies of living things, including our own bodies, we call biomass. And so productivity is how much of that made by photosynthesis is actually turned into the bodies of plants, and we call that productivity. And another way to say it is net primary productivity, and it's 10% of that energy on average. So productivity, sometimes we just say productivity, sometimes we say net primary productivity. But on land, the biomes that are the hottest and the wettest have the most productivity. And so this would be your tropical rainforest. And in the ocean, light and nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen will increase productivity. And a lot of times those nutrients come from upwelling in the ocean. So this figure and caption down here show you the most productive ecosystems or biomes. And here at the bottom, we have algal beds and reefs. An algal bed would be like our kelp forest off the coast of California, or a coral reef. So this would be the most productive. Second one is we actually have a land terrestrial, which means land ecosystem, and that would be your tropical rainforest. At the bottom, the open ocean has no upwelling, so no nutrients, so very low in productivity. Not very many things live here. And then last but not least is the desert and semi-desert shrub, which is actually chaparral would be considered semi-desert shrub, and it's because of the lack of rain. Now we get a lot of light, but we don't get a lot of rain, so that's really the reason why we don't have a lot of productivity here. We have a lot of biodiversity, a lot of different kinds of species, but not a lot of productivity. Turning the page to 112. So we can see here the primary productivity that goes on around the globe, and there are certain places that have a lot of productivity, hot and wet. So here's our Amazonian rainforest, and here's our rainforest in Africa along the equator. Very, very productive here in Costa Rica and Panama. What's not very productive, we have in purple the open ocean, again, because of the lack of upwelling and nutrients along the open ocean. Not very productive. Chaparral is kind of in between, not particularly productive over here in yellow for a land biome. And so these are the productivity rates around the globe, and it's kind of by biome. All right, so nutrients are often a limiting factor in ecosystems because you got to start with your producers. All ecosystems rely on producers. So if the producers run out of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, then they can't grow, and then the animals don't have anything to eat, and it goes on and on from there. So these are some tidbits of things that the AP test asks you about, like what is the biggest limiting factor in the ocean? And you would want to say nitrates. And for freshwater, you would want to know that freshwater tends to run out of phosphates first for its producers. And on land, in the soil, phosphates are a limiting factor because phosphates are harder to come by. Phosphates require erosion from land to bring the phosphates in, or the decomposition of dead things or animal waste. Bring in both nitrates and phosphates as well. All right, on this page we have some more about dead zones and the different kinds of dead zones we have around the world. Again, I told you we had a few off the coast of California. definitely in the Gulf of Mexico is a big, big, big one. It's the second biggest in the world, and the largest in the United States is here in the Gulf of Mexico. And then on the East Coast, and a lot of places in Europe, you'll notice these are richer countries that have a lot of dead zone because wealthier countries can use more fertilizer and eat more meat for animal manure that runs off. Know what ecotone is? So that's a transition between two different ecosystems. So I like to say that around here we are on the outskirts of the chaparral, and then the desert is close by up in Palmdale. And so we actually have a transition between chaparral and desert in places like Agua Dulce and Acton. And so that would be considered an ecotone because it has species of plants and animals from both biomes. All right, so landscape ecology is learning about ecosystems more on a larger scale, which talk about the interactions between them. So page 114, we have here landscape ecology. So we study all the interactions between the forest, the grassland, the freshwater system, because it's important to understand if you're just a marsh scientist, but you don't understand how it relates to the grassland, the river, even the people around it, the forests, then you're missing the bigger picture, and you want to see the bigger picture. Your book doesn't call it spatial ecology, but sometimes it's called spatial ecology. The figure here says landscape ecology deals with spatial patterns above the ecosystem. So make sure that you read and examine the picture. How do we understand ecosystems? Well, we study things called metapopulations. So whatever you're studying, maybe the population of trout in a stream, you have to understand that the trout, that population somehow is linked to other populations of trout in other places. So you need to understand how different patches of species, how different patches of habitat work together for metapopulations. And conservation biology is scientists who study protecting biodiversity. We'll study this in more detail in chapter 11. And conservation biologists use GIS or GPS systems very commonly now to understand what's going on with the species that they want to help. Going on to page 116, you need to know what in the world, an ecosystem good and services is. All right, so ecosystem service, we most likely call it ecosystem services. Here's where students have misconceptions. A lot of times students will define an ecosystem service as something that nature does to help itself, like the food chain. That is wrong, incorrect, don't write it down. An ecosystem service is something that nature provides humans with for economic or survival needs. So these are important parts of nature that we have to have in order to survive or make money. So here's some examples here on this list and this picture. Really, really wonderful examples here of ecosystem services. Yes, it's on the AP test. Sometimes you have to give examples. So the wild produces fish and game and crops and nuts and fruits that people can gather and eat. So that's not only survival, but if you sell them, you can make money. It forms soil for us, which we can grow crops on to make money. Nature purifies toxins from the air. Trees do that. Trees also help with water pollution, which saves us money, and we need clean water. That's survival. And then some over here, here's a nice picture showing you the things that nature does for human survival. So again, make sure that you can describe, this is a better description chart This one is a nice picture, but on an AP test you would ask to describe. If you just put ecosystems purify air, you would not get a point because you would have to say the trees take in toxins from the air and purifies it. So that's how you would get the point for this question. And we'll continue on with chapter 5 with the next video.